Here to present you some news about some actual conflicts in Colombia regarding the concept of civic culture in the country.
Okay, so first of all, we are going to define what is civic culture.
Civic culture can be characterized by two characteristics. The first is that the most citizens accept like the orders given by the authority of the state, but also a general belief in participation in civic duties. Taking the account
What the concept means, we're going to present you some news about some actual conflicts in Colombia. The first of all is El Cartel de la Toga. El Cartel de la Toga
It's a corruption scandal that has arrived to the Supreme Courts of Colombia, and even the recent case of Odebrecht, it has exposed many of our public functionaries that work at the Supreme Courts and that have show the real definition of what the justice in Colombia means. And justice in Colombia has failed. This means that the state has failed because, as Jacobo Solano says in his article, un estado sin justicia es un estado fallido. So basically, this could be like related with our readings, because here says that civic culture is not only a public thought, it's also a political thought that sometimes can affect the structure of the democracy. So probably if we start addressing and start to spreading like a good message of what civic culture means, that is not like just a civic culture, is just like as I said before, a political thought. If we install this civic culture in an effective way in Colombian culture, maybe we can start repairing our democracy.
we can also relate it to the second lecture, when it says that it have to be like a relationship between moral and the law. And in this case, we can see that the judges didn't have any relationship between their moral and the law, because their moral says that it's okay to take benefits in order to pass some laws, but the law actually prohibits that. So according to the Civic Culture is Key to Reduce Violence Study Finds article, we have to create, using civic methods, that relationship between the moral and the law.
And another news that is presented on that we're gonna present is the case of a bike rider that a few months ago was captured by some cameras. When they interviewed him, they asked him why did he pass el semáforo in red, and he just answered that he likes adrenaline, and well, he basically doesn't care about his own protection and the others.
Okay, yeah, I remember that. I remember that news. I remember that it was a recent news that a cyclist was transiting in the street, and first of all was transiting like in the streets that is only for the cars
Without helmet.
yeah. And I remember that one of like an interviewer could saw the action of he like passing the red the red light. So he interviewed him, and he said, why you just did that? And he said, as I said, my
Co-worker.
classmate, Perea. I like the adrenaline. So,
So this is an aspect that basically explains the absence of civic culture in the country. So, as we see in the Cartel de la Toga and in the bike rider case, uh, the country needs to develop ways to improve and the civic culture. We as a culture reader believe that a way to increase the civic culture might be as in the first reading says by the case of an Antanas Mocus. Antanas Mocus is an ex mayor of Bogota that made Bogota basically a social experiment in which he used some weird, to, if it is fair to call them like that, to make the women more equal, make the children more safer, and in which civic culture became more popular. He used mimes in the streets so people couldn't complain to a police officer, and he became more civic, and so is the people. So we believe one main reason to increase the civic culture may begin by the government, but basically the people itself must increase it.
also, I would like to add that we could fix cases like the one of the cyclist by, as I said before, causing like a good installation of the civic culture here in Colombia, and like taking into account the definition of it, because civic culture is not only like an individual culture, it is more like a group culture. Here in my reading, I'm going to read it. A functioning civic culture, thus, at some level, entails a capacity to see beyond the immediate interests of one's own group. This means that a civic culture is not only thinking on an individual, like, is only thinking in the other.
Yeah, but how do we change the culture in order that the culture have a relationship with the law? Antanas Mocus did is to create creative methods in order to generate more impact than the typical news could do. One purpose of our own is, do you remember the advertisement in which there were two cars that were about to crash, and it stopped at one moment when they put it in a slow motion and the two drivers stopped?
Yep.
In my opinion, that new caused a large impact into me because it actually recreated like the reasons of both drivers in order to them to stop. And actually, what it does is like to show the moment before before their death.
Basically, in consequence, civic culture is absent in Colombia, and we must begin to adapt it as Marcus adapted it with creative methods, uh, by not only thinking about ourselves as the bike rider, but thinking about how can my actions affect the other. Because if we start from that point, we can start believing that we're civic and we are educated people.
Now, taking into account the analysis presented and the indicators of the schools, one way to improve the analysis by going beyond the sources presented. So in first place, it's important to have a small research of the concepts of the lecture and also the social phenomena and the conflict. Then investigating the context of the situation, after that other sources in order to give a strength to the point of view, and this with automatically will give a better and bigger perspective and therefore a better analysis.